Hello and a warm welcome to another episode. My guest today is serial entrepreneur Janis Zech, former co-founder, chief revenue officer and CPO at Fiverr, which was listed before it got acquired by Digital Turbine for $600 million US. Now he's building up WeFlow as founder and CEO. And we will talk about how to improve forecast accuracy and what's needed to make it happen. Welcome, Janis.
So before we dive into our topic, which is because I think a lot of people will resonate with us, is kind of everyone is dreaming for a reliable forecast, but the reality slightly looks different. I would like to give you the opportunity to just give you a little bit of background. So what is the Janis about, and what have you done before?
Yeah. Glad to be here. I'm Janis. I've been founding a few different companies. In 2009, Fiverr, run that for 8.5 years as the co-founder and CRO. I think back then when CRO titles were very alien. We scaled the company to around 235 million of gross revenue, around 120 people in the revenue team. So had my fair share of learnings around forecasting there. That also resulted in the company I run now called WeFlow, which is a pipeline management and forecasting solution. I think we go a lot deeper into this topic because it's something that I think a lot of people are struggling with, and where I think there's a lot of opportunities to improve.
All right, so I'm super pleased to have a true expert in the room. So let's dive into the problem, because we all know the struggle with the result of having an unreliable, ever moving forecast. So in your own terms, how would you describe the main challenge?
Yeah. So I think there's a bunch of challenges, and it really depends on the scale of the company, right? So if you're 10 people in the revenue team, 100 people, 1,000 people, I think, forecasting is done very differently. And I think, there's one challenge that is just uncertainty of deals, right? Like whether they actually close or not. And I think that's essentially what you want to get to create a sales process that is reliable and repeatable and gives you a good understanding of, essentially close won, and also maybe close lost and renewals and expansions, right? So so I think the forecasting process is typically run is typically something that is discussed in the board. It has a big impact on the equity value. It's typically also the thing that, when you leave the room as a CRO and the board is talking about the forecast, is like, does that CRO have their business in order? Do they know what they're talking about? So it's a fundamentally big topic. But for me, it's actually more about running a revenue process that drives basically results and moves towards the target, right? So it's basically a sales performance and forecasting process. Typically, I think there's forecast categories, there's submissions the team does, there's maybe an AI prediction a machine does, and then you also typically have an annual plan that is often very detached from the reality and the bottom-up forecasting plan, right? So what basically the board, the CEO, and the CFO is working on, and then basically the bottom-up reality of what's my pipeline coverage, how is my pipeline looking, and how is my net revenue retention looking, right? So I think you have to bring those together, but I think we'll focus today really on the bottom-up forecasting process. And then if you look at that, I think the one setup we're seeing a lot is that the forecast submissions live in an Excel sheet or an email or on a Slack or Teams channel, right? So how do you make sure that you understand kind of the forecast history and that you have track changes, and then how do you make sure that actually the data is there in the CRM, because out of the box field history changes are not tracked properly. And then how do you make sure that you actually have a good process to do deal inspection, pipeline inspection, to understand where you are based on reliable data and a clear operating cadence, right? And I think that's like basically a sneak peek into what we're going to talk about in a second. But all these things matter a lot. And I think if you reflect yourself with regards to those topics, like okay, how well do you do that? How well is it established? I think these are some interesting questions.
Yeah, the topic is huge. So let's jump into the process because my guess is, and I've seen it in multiple either investments and or startups, customers, etc. Let's start with the basics. So how defined is the sales process? How do you find out the stages? You talked about kind of reliable data. I'm talking about a reliable data field. So let's work out a little bit the root causes. So what is not there yet and or not properly implemented that this is causing the effect of kind of a bumpy and unreliable forecast?
Yeah. So to get to basically one number, the forecast, and what you're doing this quarter, next quarter, I think actually I would really approach it from a sales process design perspective, right? So
go ahead.
First and foremost, you have to build a sales process infrastructure that is supporting your general pipeline management and forecasting process. So what I mean with that is, how do you define your sales stages and exit criteria for each of these stages, right? So I think that's like fundamentals, but often not necessarily done great. And so, having a very clear sales stages that mirror essentially also the customer journey with very clear exit criteria. And if you use, right, like specific sales frameworks, methodologies like MEDDIC, MEDPIC, SPICE, right, that essentially help guide through those journeys, right? And that is important because based on that, you have, your sales cycle length and also conversion rates, stage conversion rates, win rate, right? That is all part of what you're setting up there, essentially. Then second, how well do you actually track activities, the key activities against your opportunities? Emails, meetings, calls, like all the fundamentals. And again, like, that sounds really basic, but if you don't have that, right, how do you understand whether a deal is actually progressing in the right direction or in the wrong direction? How do you identify risk in the pipeline without actually understanding the key activities? And then ideally, you want to have a setup where it's not just the key activities, but there's learnings out of those key activities, right? You send an email, how many people are part of that email? Are you multi-threading? Like some fundamentals, I'd say.
All right.
The third thing, like I would think is like, and again, this is fundamentals, but like, are you actually tracking all the field history changes? Yeah. Are you understanding, what is being changed and how has it changed, right? Like, how often was the close date pushed out? How did the amount change? How was basically the deal progression, right? So like, and that's actually really important for forecasting. And unfortunately, we see setups where the CRM like don't have that out of the box. So you have to enable it. And I think typically, if you think of Salesforce as the largest CRM in the world, they're not necessarily doing that out of the box. So it's very, very important to enable that early, because if you don't have it, you can't do pacing, you can't do proper waterfall analysis ex post, right? So really, really important.
Yeah.
And then
just a quick summarize.
Yeah, sorry
to interrupt. Just to get my head straight. So first of all, it starts with a clear definition of the sales process, stages, required fields, but also exit criteria. I love exit criteria. So to really have also giving sales reps and everyone involved the comfort to, this is not going further. It's absolutely fine. So I really love that. Then we were talking about activity. I really like that to match kind of the type and the amount of activities to your deals. And the last one was kind of change log and what is happening and there's multiple facets. So would that be a kind of a brief summary and a correct one?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Perfectly summarized. There's one more topic. I mean, there's many more topics, I'd say, but one more topic that's important. And that's also sometimes, I think, maybe done in an interesting way. I mean, there's basically standardized forecast categories, right? And I think you can think of the pipeline as you have the stages, right, which essentially outline the deal progression. And then you have the forecast categories. And those are essentially an overlay into your pipeline to base your forecast on, right? And so, I mean, typically these are like commit, best case, most likely, omit, right? Like, and you can either, have like a hard match between stages and forecast categories, or you give a little bit more wiggle room. But I think, that's important to establish at some point in time. And that's typically not done when you have like 5 reps, but at some point in time, this becomes really, really important, because it is essentially I would say like a way to understand what is happening on the front line, right? If you have 100 people, you have a VP layer, you have a regional layer, you have a manager layer, and then you have, many AEs and CSMs, SEs, right? At some point in time, the visibility into what is happening on the front line is actually really, really poor for sales leaders. And so, this is essentially your pulse on the market, if done correctly, and enables you to even focus more on what is in commit, and really basing your forecast number on that, in addition to a few other things, I'd say.
Just picking up on that, because we talked about that earlier. I think what is even if you just have 2, 3, or 5 reps, what is definitely helpful is to have at least and we come to this probably later, is kind of to shape the attitude, to really get the some call it sales culture, revenue culture. So fundamental beliefs and core procedures to get implemented as soon as possible, because therefore I think the current situation and the market environment helps that you get solid data and you have solid tracking in place. Not super sophisticated in early stage companies, but at least to have this at least framework in base. Everyone is talking about the same numbers, everyone is committing to processes, everyone understands what the benefits are of it. I wouldn't say you cannot start early enough with this foundation.
Yeah. I mean, 100%, right? Like, I think building that sales process infrastructure, I think is something you should do very, very early. Whether you need forecast categories, though, I don't know, right? Like, I think there's different schools of thoughts there. You can also forecast your pipeline without that, but that typically helps. And I think it's just a proxy, right? To essentially then also get into a submission process, into a revenue cadence. And I think that's like the second topic I'd love to talk a bit deeper about. But yeah, I think getting those fundamentals right is a good starting point, because I think what we all want to do is we want to build revenue engines that are repeatable and reliable, right? And obviously all those topics we just discussed go a lot deeper than what we touched on. But I think those are some core fundamentals to get right for the pipeline management forecasting process.
All right. Before we jump into the cadences, one thing which at least for me is quite often neglected is what you mentioned earlier, is the same rules apply also for renewal, expansion. So what is happening with the existing customer base? Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, love it. Yeah, I think it's so important. I mean, I think especially this year, a lot of growth comes from existing customers. I think over the last 10 years, like, customer success, was weirdly getting into a situation where it was more like a support function, but it's strategic, right? It's very, very fundamental to essentially also create a pipeline management and forecasting process for your expansion ops, renewal ops, have very clear understanding. And then also, right, like if you think about what we talked about, like activities, it's not just your activities, it's also the buyer activities, right? Ideally, you want to understand, fundamentals from your, customer data platform, your product analytics, and incorporate that into your CRM in a way that you actually have triggers to, to drive behavior. And that's not true just for the new logo, but especially also for the expansion opportunities, for sure. Yeah, it's so important.
Yeah. All right. So thanks for supporting my little flag here. So let's jump into the cadences and really how can we make it happen? So we understood that there is often kind of these are the root causes or not properly implemented. So what is all about the cadences?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that I think the best revenue teams in the world establish an revenue operating cadence. what do I mean with that? It's essentially a set of meetings across different level of the hierarchy to essentially work towards a common goal. And I can give you some specific examples of like how we did that at Fiverr. We're also doing that at WeFlow.
Nice.
And just and I think this is really depending on the sales cycle length, the amount of your sales motion, right? Are you SMEs, so you have, I don't know, 30 to 50 deals a month, or are you focused on enterprise? You have 1 to 2 deals a quarter, right? So this motion has a big impact onto your operating cadence. But yeah, I think fundamentally there's like some time frames that frame the whole thing. And so the way we typically see this set up is you have a quarterly cadence and a weekly cadence, but some people do bi-weekly or monthly. Specifically, we kicked off the quarter with basically reviewing the previous quarter in a set of different meetings and then focusing on the new quarter, right? So this is essentially a quarterly kickoff that was, had a set of different meetings. And then we also have quarterly board meetings to share forecasts and actuals. And, then, what is, I think, a lot more interesting is the weekly cadence. So it started with something that's actually asynchronous, but still, it's based on behavior. So it's like a weekly Salesforce hygiene blocker. I think a lot of people do that on a Friday or before the basically pipeline meetings. Right? Like making sure that the data is there, the data that you cannot automate, and you actually have good understanding of the pipeline hygiene. Ideally, this is something that just happens, naturally, but it often doesn't, and it has real strong ripple effects from my point of view. And then, there was like a hard requirement to have weekly one-on-ones for coaching and training, and this also included, I think there's a lot of, like, in the last 10 years, there has been a lot of talk around like kind of watching a recording and then coaching that. And I think that's valuable, but very little done because it's very time consuming. But I think really going into the deals and discussing risk, discussing next steps, thinking about where can you actually win more, right? And again, going back to the earlier discussion, right? If you have your exit criteria, if you have the data, if you have the key activities, it becomes a lot easier for the rep and for the manager to understand where are things going wrong? Where do I have to do something, right? And that's exactly, I think, the job of sales, right? You have a lot of uncertainty because you don't know what the buyers are talking about when you leave the room. So how do you make sure that you reduce that uncertainty and you control that situation? And in some deals, it's just, it's just wonderful, right? They just flow, right? Like, and you have very clear progression, but then many times you don't, right? And then either you need to close loss to not spend more time and, set a kind of a renewal or like a revisiting task, or you basically do something about it, right? And I think those meetings are really centered around that, but they're often not. Also
and
to be,
to add on that, because I think it's fundamentally important to have this one-on-one, and in particular in this kind of trust relationship, because even with all the best setup you have, there is still, so overall it's still kind of, sales is complex. There's a lot of uncertainty, and even if you have kind of data input from the reps, there is still a huge chance that it's even not sufficient, or it's not. So you really have to dive into, especially in all the nitty-gritty details, which is then turned into a life learning experience. So I really love that. But to come to this point and building up the trust that you are operating the best interest, that you have kind of supporting the aligned targets on, this is a process where I believe there's no shortcut. And I totally agree with you that it's the reality looks slightly different, that this time is not invested or kind of consistently invested into.
Yeah. And I mean, I think, yeah, I 100% agree. I think it's not just the deal kind of inspection, right? It's also like understanding career progression, understanding where can you help to coach and train, right? I think as a manager, right, your job is it to essentially get AEs or whoever you're managing, right, to take your job one day, right? And to be able to grow and learn. And if the journey is okay, I want to go from, you know, maybe like SME to enterprise AE and just want to stay in that expert lane, great, right? But I think fundamentally, like, you should have a vested interest in the people you're working with, and you should help them become the best version of themselves and really help them grow and learn. I think, you know, that's why I love, you know, creating companies, because, you know, I think it's just fundamentally interesting to see people grow from one stage to the another, and, you know, and have career defining experiences, right? I think that's like, you know, like, and I think it's very hard to fake. So we could probably talk about one-on-ones for just another whole episode. Like, it's a very important, but I think just having that weekly touch point, even, you know, if you say, okay, we don't have anything to discuss, let's cut it short, right? But I think it's not just for legal inspection. But obviously, you know, deals are typically part of the goals, right? So you actually want to work on things that make the person more successful, with a genuine interest in having them succeed.
Yeah, I really like the mindset. So okay, we have coming back to the cadence, because there's so much more into it, and you're always invited to join me for another episode. So the invitation is open. So awesome. Let's come back to the cadence and so we touched the weekly rhythm, or the kind of different meetings. We talked about the weekly. So what is also in the formula?
Yeah. So, okay, so we basically have, you know, making sure that you have good data in your CRM, making sure that you have good, you know, signals into, you know, your pipeline and deals, and having room to discuss those, right? Then typically there's like regional pipeline meetings. So that might be, you know, team meetings that can be for new logo, existing logo, right? You can basically have different groups coming together. We did that on a weekly basis, basically discuss pipeline, also including pipeline coverage, right? Like, and that included we had multiple layers, right? So like that included also the area VP level as well, and the managers. And I mean, I think these meetings are very much centered around like, how are we pacing? So it's a bit of like pipeline and forecasting. So how are we pacing against, you know, target? You know, what are the I mean, we didn't talk a lot about like submission or like forecast submissions, but typically, you know, everyone had to do a forecast submission every week and own that number, in addition to having, you know, the forecast categories and having deals in commit, right? So you basically then have another layer, right, that is essentially doing team submissions on a weekly or bi-weekly basis or monthly basis, depending on the sales cycle again. And so if you look at the pacing, right, it basically gives you what is pacing, right? It gives you an understanding of, you know, how is your pipeline looking, commit, best case, most likely pipeline, right? So what's the value of that? What is the value of your quota target, right? So basically your revenue target against that. And what is your team submission calls, right? So how are you pacing? And then how is that developing over time? Going back to, it's important to track field histories, right? If you don't do that, right, like that is why you do it. And so you get an understanding of, okay, this is how we're pacing. You get also an understanding with waterfall charts to, you know, understand, okay, what came into the pipeline, and what went out of the pipeline, what was pushed out, where's maybe the close date, you know, in the past, that always happens, but also what were the new deals coming in, and then having a very quick view from those into the into the opportunity layer, right? So basically going from pipeline analytics and forecast analytics directly back into the deals and understanding what is driving those numbers, right? So again, that's like a very typical meeting, I'd say. Most people run on a weekly basis in different groups. And then that also, and then you have, like, we had a bi-weekly forecast meeting, including kind of the area VPs, the CRO, the CEO, CFO. And then we had weekly executive meetings where those topics always came up, but it was more based on KPIs, right? So yeah, those were the set of meetings. And I think it's really, really good to establish that kind of operating cadence, because it's almost like a rhythm of the business, and it combines, a lot of the things you actually want to achieve with a repeatable cadence that everybody knows and follows, and it becomes a habit, right? And I think that's super important in, running teams, that you over time develop a habit to do certain things repeatedly. And then at some point, you could say, okay, this is actually really a process, and everybody who comes in, you understands what the operating rules are. And so, obviously, in addition to this process, it's important that it's actually lived, and that there's, again, clear expectations to which each of these meetings. And you also have to adjust it over time, right? Like, I think it's always a trade-off between how many meetings do we do and what can we do asynchronously. So over the years, that has become a much bigger topic for myself as well. But this is, I'd say, like one way of running an revenue operating cadence.
Yeah, thanks so much. Super insightful. And what pops immediately into my head, depending, of course, on the sales motion itself, this as a base is super important also to then align marketing in either kind of pushing demand or have an alignment with product. Could be potential that you're shipping up a potential expansion product, or have anything for upselling. You also have this alignment with the commercial area. So I really like this as the base, and then you can really iterate on taking key initiatives out of this to either hit the current quarter or prepare the next one. So super, super helpful.
Yeah, I think that's actually a great point, right? I think marketing should sit in some of those meetings. At Fiber, we were very sales heavy, so marketing almost it played a role, but it didn't it's not comparable to I'd say the standard SaaS company. We were very enterprise focused. So but yeah, I think it's essentially a framework, and it's very important to write it down and really deeply think about how do you construct those meetings, what are the goals, to document it, and then to train everybody around it. Similar to some of the other things where I think training and coaching is really important. So yeah.
Great. So to wrap it up, so we started with the result, and often it's kind of the result which we try to optimize. But so we had the result of an unstable, unreliable forecast, and then we went into the root causes. So we said, okay, often there is a lack in foundation building. So not clearly defined sales process, no clearly defined stages with required data field and exit criteria. Then we also jumped into there. It's definitely worth having a thorough look at the amount and the type of activities, and also the change log in particular. And then we jumped into the cadences, where you super valuable aligned some details, multiple sequences, stakeholders to get then not just the engine fueled, but kind of the processes and the rhythm and the consistency into the organization. Is there anything else I forgot, or you would like to add to that briefly summary?
It's a good question. Probably many things, but I think in a nutshell, yeah, I think that's a good starting point. I think all those aspects have a lot of details we probably didn't discuss, right? Like we already mentioned, that some of those specific topics we could probably talk about for hours. But I think as a general framework, that's a great summary. And I hope many folks follow it to essentially drive more success, right? I think that's what we all love and enjoy. Yeah.
Then let me add one thing, if I dare to add one thing, because what I really truly loved about what you mentioned is the mindset and the underlying attitude in enabling and supporting everyone to have this. It also is a part of your development plan. So I really like that perspective, because at the very end, you can just win this together, and you need kind of fully engaged and motivated people. So I really like that, to facilitating the process and enabling the people. So I really like that.
Yeah, this is actually, it's funny you mentioned this, because like at WeFlow, for example, we do like a weekly get together, which we call kind of a learning session. And I mean, the whole idea of that session is marketing, sales, and product comes together and talks about what they observe. And it's, between 30 to 45 minutes. Sometimes we, cut it short. Sometimes we do it, 45 minutes. There's typically a few things, but it's really like, like, okay, this email worked, right? And I think this is not just a meeting. We also have Slack channels where it's a very simple thing, right? But like we share email replies and objections, like very simple, right? But like everybody shares it in, and it just creates this, discussion then around like, okay, this is how I would reply. This is how I would reply. And so I think, in general, right? Like being one team, helping each other, trying to establish a culture where also not just the managers help, but like everybody helps each other, and everybody understands that that's important to win, because typically you're not fighting against each other, right? You're fighting essentially to essentially take on bigger things, at least in a startup and scale up. And it's always competitive. I think all the markets are very competitive these days. So, becoming really good at this is, in my mind, as important as product, right? Like that's essentially what makes a software company successful. And so, yeah, like, again, like coaching, learning, training, like, how do you do that well? I think if you're more scaled, there needs to be more specific things that are surfaced, right? Like really like, what are the key things where we're losing, where we're not, like, where do we need to get better? And then develop curricula around it, and help the individuals to become better. So I think that's obviously a huge topic, but these are simple things you can do tomorrow, and they drive more success from my point of view.
Yeah, and becomes part of the corporate culture, which I love. And then you can become always sophisticated, but it's super hard to build up this core belief and core principles. So what a closing remark. I really, really love it, Janis. Last question, it's more on a personal note, because we were talking about learning, and I started to ask one last question at the very end. So is there something you learn you do not master yet currently?
I would say there's so many things, actually. So I spend a lot of time with like positioning, messaging, ICP, how do you tell the story? I think that's a fascinating thing, because it's so important and really hard to master from my point of view. So that's something I spend quite some time with. But honestly, for me, like startups are learning journeys, right? Like that's why I love it. Like it's basically almost like it's like a better MBA. You just go do it and you learn so much. And so with regards to content marketing, sales processes, building product, like there's so much I think I'm still learning every day, and that's actually one of the things what I really enjoy. So yeah, many things. Yeah.
All right. So this is the end. Thanks so much for taking your time. And I wish you a wonderful day and all the best of success. We will link your profile, and everyone who is interested in whether your company or you personally, I think, to make it as convenient as possible to reach out to you.
Yes, please do so. I would love to chat. Thank you so much for the invitation.
It was fun. Thank you. Bye-bye.